Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of All Steelers Talk, presented by All Steelers on Sports Illustrated. I am Donnie June, joined every week by the leader of the pack, Noah Strackmine. Noah, how's it going, man?
It's going fantastic, Donnie. We're in minicamp. We are a month away from training camp. Football is back.
Football is indeed back, and like you said, minicamp is starting to rev up. We're fastly approaching training camp. It's just a little over 30 days until the Steelers are allowed to report back to, St. Latrobe, to where they recently missed last year due to COVID-19. So I'm sure everybody, including players and fans, will be happy to get back there. But let's not jump the gun, quite yet. Still got some things to figure out at Heinz Field. Man, talking is hard today. At Heinz Field. And, there's a lot going on with the Steelers. First, I'm going to break down James Pierre, the emergence of the undrafted free agent last year. Got a little bit of playing time towards the end of the season. There was a lot of hype building for him heading to the offseason. Steven Nelson gets cut, and all of a sudden people are looking at guys like James Pierre as a potential dude who could be a stud in 2021.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, if you ask me right now what the starting lineup will be, I don't want to put Cam Sutton in the slot at nickel, but their best bet is to put Cam Sutton in the slot at nickel and to allow James Pierre on the outside because he looks like the best corner out of the group of, I guess, Shakur Brown, Antoine Brooks. You could put Lamont Wade in there, Trey Norwood, all these other guys, Justin Lane as well. I would put Justin Lane ahead of everybody else, but James Pierre looks like the guy who's a starting cornerback. He looks like a guy who has a lot of growth. Terrell Austin talked to us today, and he had nothing negative to say about the guy. All he kept talking about was how this is a guy who's big, who's long, and who has a lot of potential for the future, which opened my eyes, and I think it opened everybody else's eyes.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the Steelers' main goal whenever trying to hit on those cornerbacks, getting a guy for the future. We've seen time and time again, the Steelers, at least at the outside corner position, have opted for those bigger, taller guys, at least, in the mid rounds of the draft. Guys like Justin Lane, guys like Brian Allen to stretch a few years back, just to name a few. Artie Burns going in the first round a couple of years as well. There's certainly a track record the Steelers have at least tried to establish over the years, and it hasn't really worked. Then again, they didn't even draft James Pierre. James Pierre kind of just fell in their lap after not being drafted in 2020. But here we are. And I don't necessarily want to say that the hype train for James Pierre is partly due to everybody's dissatisfaction with the small amount of playing time that Justin Lane has gotten. But I feel like heading into that CB1, CB2 race outside of Joe Hayden, it's mainly a two-headed monster, into where it's going to come down between guys like Justin Lane and James Pierre. Would you say that Pierre has a pretty good leg on Lane heading into training camp?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I would say right now, Justin Lane's in the mix, and obviously he's going to stay in the mix because he's a third-round pick. At some point, they're really hoping that he turns into something, and maybe that something is just a depth piece. Worst-case scenario, the Pittsburgh Steelers could walk into this season and say, James Pierre is our starting outside corner, opposite of Joe Hayden. Cameron Sutton is going to play nickel. We don't have anybody behind Sutton that could be a reliable guy. And Justin Lane is just a depth piece who could come in for James Pierre or Joe Hayden because you need that guy. So I would say, yeah, James Pierre has a pretty high or pretty big leg on Justin Lane. I would still say Justin Lane's in the mix. But if they're going to put somebody on the outside and bump Cam Sutton to the inside, it's going to be Pierre. If it's Justin Lane, personally, I think that you could find somebody to play the nickelback spot that's just as good as Justin Lane would be on the outside. So why would you do that?
Yeah, and that was something that Mark Caboli of The Athletic actually pointed out in one of his articles yesterday. I believe it was a mailbag that he did, talking about, the Steelers, whenever they re-signed Cam Sutton, they weren't wanting to put him in a box. They didn't want him to only play outside corner. And he said if the season probably started today, I think were his words, that James Pierre would be playing on the outside opposite of Joe Hayden, and Cam Sutton would be anchoring that kind of slot corner position. So I think that goes to tell you the faith that not only the media has in James Pierre, but probably the coaches as well. And I believe he picked up Ben Roethlisberger twice in practice on Wednesday.
Twice, once in a 2-minute drill, once on a fake. It was a fake, spike. Drop back, threw it up to Deontay Johnson. James Pierre came down with it. It was a great play. Both of them were great plays. James Pierre looks very, very confident for a second-year guy who came out of nowhere didn't play much last season, was pretty much looked at as just like a depth piece. Nobody even knew about him coming into this year. And then boom, here he is. I would say that there are options on the inside, though. I mean, people are kind of overlooking all of it because of James Pierre. And I get that, because you want the best players on the field, and James Pierre is the best player on the field. But Antoine Brooks is an emerging name in the slot. He was a 6th-round pick last year. Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin's both said that Brooks is a natural slot guy, and he plays real well in the slot. Trey Norwood literally got compared to Cam Sutton on Wednesday, basically said, hey, this guy is just as intelligent. He's just as smooth everywhere on the field. So he's obviously a name. Shakur Brown had a big signing when he came in as an undrafted free agent. He's super slow, but he's definitely a name. And then you got guys like Lamont Wade, who is probably going to make the team as a special teamer and then could work his way into a role on defense if he's good enough.
Undoubtedly, yeah. The Steelers certainly have a lot of options going forward in their defensive secondary. Just kind of touch back on what Kaboli said. I remember reading in the article that he did mention Trey Norwood would probably end up playing a lot of safety this year, not necessarily corner. But Steelers love their versatile guys. I mean, I feel like every single draft pick, at least on the defensive side of the ball, they're able to move around kind of wherever. And that kind of comes with the freedom of the Steelers using picks on those guys.
Before we jump into another defense or more offense, when it comes to a guy like Trey Norwood, remember that Mike Hilton and Cam Sutton both played safety their rookie season. Large amounts of safety. I mean, Mike Hilton was very undervalued at the safety position in his rookie season, as much as he played in the nickel. And Cam Sutton played a large chunk as the primary backup safety the last 2 years. So, I mean, Trey Norwood could play a lot of his snaps at safety because Minkah Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmunds need that relief more than Joe Hayden and Cam Sutton and whoever's playing in the nickel. But, I mean, that's where most of these guys, these Cam Sutton-like guys, start.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting, too. Obviously, Trey Norwood has been out there for minicamp, and another player hasn't, but we'll kind of get to him in a second. Do you notice anything speed-wise with guys like Trey Norwood, guys like Justin Lane? Do you think they're fast enough to play in the slot consistently against some of the best slot receivers in the NFL, guys like Jarvis Landry and Keenan Allen?
I want to say Trey Norwood is. Trey Norwood looks quick, and he looks confident. He looks like he has the defense down, which is a lot to say for a guy who just came here a month ago. But he looks like he's intelligent enough to know where the football is going to be and know where players are going to be. He's probably somebody that will understand route trees better than most people on the field. So, yeah, I think he is fast enough. Justin Lane's fast, and he's a quick, athletic guy, but Justin Lane does not look like somebody who could play on the inside. He never really has played on the inside, and I think if they toss him in there, if you're asking me, it's going to be a nightmare. Justin Lane's going to go in there, and Jarvis Landry is going to eat him up because he's not physical enough, and he's certainly not, and I don't want to say intelligent, but he doesn't have a high enough football IQ to compete with guys like Jarvis Landry or even a guy like JuJu Smith-Schuster on the inside.
Noah, you are the king of segue, so I'll kind of just piggyback off of that heading into our next topic of discussion. JuJu Smith-Schuster, Steelers star wide receiver, in sweats for minicamp, kind of just chilling, hanging out. First of all, it's got to be hot out there on the field, so I'm not sure what he's doing in sweats. Second of all, Noah, why is he not practicing?
That is the question for the ages. JuJu is not practicing at minicamp. He did not practice at OTAs, and it's kind of suspicious. I mean, all right, I'm sitting there at OTAs, and JuJu shows up day 2. He's there, or week 2, and he's there for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and he's limping off the field. He's going into the training room. And I'm like, all right, well, that's probably the last we see of JuJu. And it was the last we saw of JuJu on the field. Minicamp starts. He's there for the first portion in the morning. He's there for individual drills. Like 2 plays into 7-on-7, he comes limping off the field. And then he shows up in sweatpants. And you could say whatever you want, and I'm not going to put words in JuJu's mouth, but JuJu's a guy playing on a contract year who expects to make $17 million a season next year on a different team. He's not going to run himself into the ground in Pittsburgh. Whether you say he's a team player or not, he's a businessman first. He's always been a businessman first. He's not going to run himself into the ground and say, well, I'm going to decrease my value because I didn't get it this offseason like I expected.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of touching on the business mindset that Juju has. I mean, all of the off-field stuff, whether we did TikTok or just streaming, it is for fun. I'm sure he thinks it's fun,
Yeah.
but it's building his brand. It's building something outside of football. Football for all of these guys isn't going to last forever. And I'm sure Juju will make plenty of money to sit on his behind on after his playing career is over. But there are different venues and different avenues that Juju will probably seek while he's still playing.
Yep.
And I think Juju is smart enough to recognize the different, revenue streams that are possible, and he's attacking it full frontal. But focusing back on the field, I think it's smart. Guys complain about the daily grind of training camp and how physical it is. It's just the 2 days are miserable, and I completely understand it. Why would Juju want to go out in mini camp and try to risk something? I mean, how many times have we seen non-contact injuries, which is majority of the injuries you're going to see in minicamp, derail somebody's career? I mean, the Bengals just lost one of their best offensive linemen for almost the entire season with a pectoral injury in minicamp. Like,
Yep. That's
it,
exactly
it, it
what it
makes
is.
sense.
Juju, I mean, okay, so you just have to look at everything. Juju didn't go to Baltimore because he wanted to save his brand. Big business move. Definitely a business move. Came back to Pittsburgh because he knew that if he's going to have a big season, it's going to be in Pittsburgh so that he could get paid mega money next year. Business move. He fires his agent and switches agents right before his contract year. Business move. Jay-Z could not get the job done. We're moving on to somebody else. He doesn't practice at minicamp or OTAs. Business move. Juju's going to look at this entire season not as, and people are going to get mad, and people are probably going to get mad at me for saying this, but Juju's not going to look at this season like I want to win a Super Bowl. Juju's going to look at this season like I want to get paid millions and millions of dollars more than I already am in 2022. Good for him. Go get your money. Go win a Super Bowl in 2-3 years. You're 24 years old. But if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, or if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers in general, you shouldn't be sitting around thinking JuJu Smith-Schuster is going to give it his all this season, because chances are JuJu Smith-Schuster gives it enough to get a mega deal next year.
So I'm not necessarily worried about Juju giving it his all, and I'm not worried about him kind of taking plays off, whenever it comes to contract here. Like you'll be able to like blatantly see if Juju isn't giving 100%. I think winning a Super Bowl this year would only help him secure the bag financially. Because think about it, you go out, you win a Super Bowl at the end of this year, you're looking at the Steelers, you're like, okay, I already got a Lombardi ring with you. Show me the money,
Oh,
and
yeah.
team saw I just balled out in the Super Bowl, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. Show me the money. Open up the case. Like there's, the financial possibilities will only get stronger for Juju should he win a Super Bowl in Pittsburgh. But let me ask you this before we actually talk about his playing on the field, where he might be playing on the field in 2021. Do you think a Super Bowl or lack of Super Bowl this year would at all incentivize Juju to stay in Pittsburgh and try to win one?
No, I don't look at, and look at again, like, the 100%. Yeah. Chances are Juju's going to give 100% on the field. I get that. And he's, obviously trying to win a Super Bowl like every other player is. And Juju's not this guy. Like, I don't look at Juju like I looked at, guys like Terrell Owens and those guys who were just all about the money and all about the flash. I don't look at that, but Juju is a businessman before anything. So chances are, yeah, Juju would take a playoff or would take a couple of plays off throughout a game if his stat line's already looking pretty good. And if you ask Juju, he'd probably say no to that, but minicamp speaks for itself. When it comes to coming back to the Steelers, if he doesn't win a ring, no. Juju's not really worried about a ring. He's worried. He's 24 years old. He's got his whole career to win a ring. And you can't expect – Juju's not a guy who's going to go to the Atlanta Falcons or, the Detroit Lions or somebody who's not going to win a ring. He's going to end up somewhere like Kansas City or Baltimore or Tennessee or somebody with money who could also compete for Lombardi. And those are going to be the teams that offer him as well, because those are, you'd never see the Detroit Lions go out and offer a wide receiver mega money. You want to know why? Because it doesn't make any difference to their team. So wherever Juju ends up next season, they're going to be a competitor. So unfortunately, that doesn't help Pittsburgh in the long run. And chances are, if Ben's gone next season, the Steelers aren't a Super Bowl contender anyways.
I think you took the words right out of my mouth. I think some people would even argue that they're not even a Super Bowl contender this year with Ben Roethlisberger, and that'll largely depend on the offense that they're going to be running. And a big portion of that will be Matt Canada's installation. And Matt Canada, who spoke to the media for the first time after being promoted by Mike Tomlin to offensive coordinator, said that a big focal point of the offense was going to be putting his players in the right positions to win. He was asked about JuJu Smith-Schuster playing on the outside because that's been a really big thing for JuJu. And to be honest, it's kind of where the money is for outside receivers. You don't see a whole lot of slot guys being paid. But regardless, he said that JuJu is a guy who can work inside, who can work outside. It really doesn't make a difference. You put him wherever, and he's going to make a play. My question to you is, A, do you think Matt Canada will primarily use JuJu as a slot receiver in 2021? And B, do you think JuJu seriously only wants to play on the outside?
All right, so I'll answer the second one first. Yeah, JuJu only wants to play on the outside because it goes right back to what we just talked about. JuJu just wants the money. That's all he wants is the money, and he should go chase that money. And he fully understands that his bag is going to come with him playing on the outside more than him playing on the inside. Unfortunately, it doesn't make any sense for JuJu Smith-Schuster to play on the outside because, one, he doesn't play better on the outside than he does on the inside, and two, Ray McLeod is the backup, and I'm sorry, but if your options are Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and JuJu Smith-Schuster, or JuJu Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, and Ray McLeod, you're going with option A.
No, you're completely right, and I personally think that JuJu works best out of the slot. JuJu isn't necessarily a speed guy. I'm not calling him slow, but he's not necessarily an Odell Beckham guy. He's good at route running, but he's not a premier elite route runner. He's not a guy like Stephon Diggs. He's not a guy like Jarvis Landry, Keenan Allen. He's not kind of any of those guys. He's really good at a handful of things, but not like superiorly great at another. I don't even know if that's a word, by the way, superiorly. But what JuJu...
Real quick, you want to know what he is superiorly good at? Is catching the ball and fighting for 4 yards, which is perfect in the slot.
100%. That's where JuJu's size comes into play. I mean, he's a very, very big receiver. You put him in a slot with a lot of slot corners who tend to be smaller, and then you also get those matchups with those safeties and those linebackers. You can't necessarily keep up with a guy like JuJu. Granted, like I said, he's not a runner, he's not a track star, but he's a guy who can win a foot race if needed, depending on what the matchup is. I think he works best whenever he has a very big mismatch in the slot and whenever he has to make contested catches. And I think a lot of the contested catches we have seen JuJu make was playing on the boundary. The Jacksonville playoff game comes to mind where he had to make a handful of big catches down the stretch to keep the Steelers in it in 2017. The couple catches he had against Oakland, whenever Antonio Brown was still on the team back in 2018, that comes to mind. Just a lot of the work he does comes with him high pointing the ball and coming down with it because he has such a big body and he's able to do so. And I think that's best utilized in the slot where guys like Chase Claypool probably can't play there. I know Deontay Johnson can play there, but I feel like Deontay might be a little bit better suited as of now to play on the outside.
Yeah, he's way too quick to play on the inside. Deontay Johnson is a guy who's natural. He's Antonio Brown. We've been saying that since the day he was drafted, is that he's probably the best route runner on the team. When he catches the ball, he's pretty phenomenal in open space. He makes people miss. That's not somebody you want on the inside. JuJu, especially in this offense. I mean, Matt Canada is going to come in here. He's going to add jet sweeps. He's going to add a bunch of motion. He's going to try to confuse defenses and get guys like Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson and JuJu Smith-Schuster open. And if you want those guys to have the ball in the open field, you want JuJu to have it in the middle of the field because that's what JuJu does. He's a giant body. He came in. He looks bigger than he did last season, and that's pretty hard to do. You don't want that on the outside. You want Chase Claypool running deep, trying to go up and finally catch some passes instead of fight for interference calls. You want Deontay Johnson to be your short route guy who makes real big, flashy plays. And then you want JuJu Smith-Schuster to be your big body in the middle that Ben can throw to almost all the time. And another reason is Ben Roethlisberger is a guy who people constantly complain about how he can't throw the ball deep anymore, how he doesn't have this accuracy or the arm strength or whatever. Well, if you can't throw the ball deep and you're 39 years old, the place you're looking is the middle of the field. If you're JuJu Smith-Schuster, you're a pretty smart guy. You should realize that. You should know that Ben's going to look your way 9 times out of 10. again, it all comes back full circle. JuJu is a guy who just wants to get paid next season, and I don't blame him for wanting to get paid next season at all. But he's looking at this as a business decision, and when it comes to his stat line and everything else, he'd have a better year in the slot. Matt Canada knows that, and fortunately enough, Canada's going to be the guy who tells him, sorry, bro, you're playing in the slot. That's where
part of the reason why I like JuJu so much is because he's been one of the few receivers over the last few years that's been willing to do the dirty work. I think JuJu is probably the toughest receiver the Steelers have seen since Heinz Ward left the team. And kind of touching on the point you said earlier, JuJu, he'll catch the ball and he'll get you an extra 3 or 4 yards almost every time. He's that kind of grinder, he's that kind of fighter. Sure, he can make highlight reel plays whenever needed, but whenever the team needs a handful of yards on third down, you know who they're going to.
No, exactly. They're going to go to JuJu. I mean, that's what I remember sitting in a Zoom call or an interview. It's a Zoom calls now with JuJu last season. And the entire Zoom call was about how JuJu loves third downs and fighting for those extra yards. That didn't change overnight. That's still who he is. And wherever he goes next season, they're going to utilize him the same exact way. The difference is that next season, he's not going to be looking for money. Now he's looking for a contract. That's just how this whole thing's working out. Is JuJu's mindset is business oriented. And for the 100th time, I understand it. But schematically, it just doesn't work out.
Really quick, before we move on from wide receivers, I did want to get your opinion on this. Steelers receivers coach Ike Hilliard earlier today acknowledged that the Steelers wide receiving core last year led the league in drops. And when kind of asked about what they were doing, the case of drops that they had, didn't really give like a straightforward answer. He kind of said everybody in the room knows what they have to do. And I know Deontay Johnson, even though drops are a unofficial stat, he led the league in drops last year with 16. And obviously we saw Claypool, JuJu, and even Ray McLeod, at times have trouble with catching the ball. Do you think that's something that's able to be fixed? Do you think it's a mental thing? Like, what are your thoughts on the Steelers trying not to take that crown again for a second straight year?
I think it's a mix of both. I think that obviously it's a mental thing, but most of football, when it comes to things like drops or missed tackles or missed kicks, is a mental thing. But it's definitely something you could work on. I mean, if you're a wide receiver and you're constantly going through drills where you're getting beat up while you're making catches, I mean, you're going to go catch pretty difficult balls. Unfortunately, most of guys like Deontay Johnson's catch or drops last season came wide open passes over the middle of the field. So there's really nothing you could do about that except for teach them or tell them to go out there and change it. I mean, Ike Hilliard knows that. He was pretty upset, but you kind of tell in the whole, interview that he wasn't really feeling it, and he doesn't really know what to talk about because he's working under a new offense that's going to add a bunch of new things for his wide receivers. And I think right now he's just kind of adjusting to that. But when it comes to the drops, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, that might be the least of his concerns right now.
Look, I get it. I mean, as a receiver coach, you have no control over that whatsoever. So if I'm standing in front of the media and someone's like, yo, what do you think about the drops? Then I'm just kind of like, well, like, I didn't do it. So I don't know, man. Like,
they have
to them. Like, obviously, I want them to catch the ball. It's kind of their job. Is why they're getting paid as handsomely as they are. So I get it, but I feel like as a receiver coach, there's got to be something you can do, man. Something.
I wish I knew what it was. I mean,
we
talked to Deontay Johnson earlier this offseason, and he seemed pretty confident about bouncing back. I mean, last year he bounced back pretty well at the end of the year, but it's all going to come down to attitude. It's going to come down to how well this offense actually does leave these receivers open. And another thing is the Steelers as a whole last season for the last 6 games were in the biggest slump in the NFL. So you could probably tie a lot of their problems into how big of a slump they were actually in. When you don't have any mojo, you're going to make more mistakes, and those are just going to lead to more mistakes, more mental mishaps, and less mojo as a whole. So it's tough. One thing, I don't know where you're going with this, but I do want to mention this before we move away from the offense.
Yeah.
Something I noticed at OTAs today, and I feel like it's not getting talked about, or not OTAs, minicamp today, and I feel like it's not getting talked about, is everybody is real worried about the Steelers offensive line. And I don't think I was worried about the Steelers offensive line until I realized that the Steelers' offensive line is not practicing together at all. Zach Banner is still rehabbing his ACL injury. David DeCastro has not practiced at all through any of this. He wasn't even at minicamp on Wednesday. And Chooks is the only set in stone starter outside of Kevin Dotson. So it's just a bunch of random guys who probably aren't even going to make the team filling in at starting roles, working with Ben and all these other guys. For the first time, I've been very concerned about this offensive line, and I've been waiting all day to tell you how concerned I am.
Yeah, no, I get it. I definitely do. But I think when training camp rolls around, when the preseason rolls around, I mean, we're forgetting the Steelers have that extra preseason game with the Hall of Fame game against Dallas to work with. So, they'll have a what used to be normal 4-game preseason stretch. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that. However, when you're installing a new offense and the new offense's blocking scheme is predicated on zone blocking, which requires a decent amount of communication, from player to player as they kind of move as a unit, you're going to need cohesiveness. You are going to need some sort of linkage, camaraderie. I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for here is. Just a sense of like moving together, because you need that. You need to know that the guy on your left is going to do his job and get the nose tackle if you're going to climb up to the linebacker. You need to know if the guy on your right is going to get that defensive end while you come back and double team on the nose guard. There's certain things you need to understand. And these guys are professionals, so like I'm no one to kind of sit here and tell them that they can't learn how to do their job. But I mean, it would be better if they were there, right?
It would be so much better if they were there, and they're only kind of professionals. I mean, you look at most of the guys that are out there working with the first team right now, outside of J.C. Hassenauer, Kevin Dotson, and Chooks, are undrafted guys just trying to find a spot, or Dan Moore, who's a 4th-round pick. There's nobody out there. Joe Haig, I guess, who me and you know that Joe Haig is not the most promising guy on the roster. So it's a bunch of professionals. I get it, but it's a bunch of guys who are trying to become professionals, learning a brand new offense that all the guys in front, it goes so deep. I mean, right now the defense does not get to work against a strong offensive line, and you could pretty much see that. And when Ben's dropping back in the pocket and he's got to take off half the time, that's not the offense that they're trying to run at all. So it's screwing up pretty much everything. I don't know where David DeCastro is. Mike Tomlin said that he was an excused absence on Wednesday, but he hasn't practiced throughout OTAs, and he didn't suit up on the first day of minicamp. And Zach Banner's just a waiting game at this point. So it's tough. It's like if you're the offense right now and you're trying to figure all this out and not having a set in stone offensive line. I mean, Rashad Coward is the guy who was taking literally every single first team snap at right guard. That guy is not going to make the team. He's not going to make the team.
You're right.
So you're not helping anybody. You're just making it more difficult. And come preseason, you're going to throw everybody in there and say, all right, guys, you got 2 series. Go figure it out, because by week 1, you got to know everything that's going on. It's not promising.
Yeah. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth, man. And obviously, they have a bunch of time, and time will tell. But, as of the looks right now, you would definitely prefer for all of your starters to be there. And going from starters to potential starters, one guy that has been there during minicamp for the Steelers, 7th-round pick rookie punter Presley Harvin III.
Yes, sir.
Making noise at minicamp. He apparently has a golden foot. He can't, misplace a ball. Any ball that he punts lands exactly where he wants it to. There's a lot of hype generating around him. The buzz is real. Might have to add him to the killer bees if his buzz is going to be this high. Special teams coach Danny Smith came out and said that they might even run a punter sneak, which might be a more quarterback sneaks than we've seen Ben Roethlisberger take in the last 10 years. That's a whole nother topic, though. What are your thoughts on Presley Harvin?
I love Presley Harvin. And so I'll tell you a story. Cam Hayward came over, and I've watched Jordan Berry punt for 2 years now, and nobody's ever even batted an eye at the guy. Like, nobody even remembers he's out there. I looked at him today. Literally today, I looked at him and said, who's number 4? And I was like, oh, it's Jordan Berry. And Presley Harvin, he's sending punts back. They're working on special teams. This is the last day of OTAs. And Cam Hayward comes over and he starts calling him the Hamburglar, like to his face. Like he just starts yelling Hamburglar. Presley Harvin boots a kick, boots a punt, pins it in the 5, within the 5. It was like a 65-yard punt. Crazy hang time, boots it, pins it right on the 5-yard line. I've never once in my life seen so many people get that rowdy over a punt. This man is all electric. He looks like a linebacker. I'm starting to think that he's less jacked and just more big, but that's still fine. And the dude's got an arm. So he's everything you want in a punter and more. Yeah. He's got a dope name. I don't know, man. Presley Harvin's my dude.
Sign him up. What punter? What number is he wearing this year? Do you know?
Oh, number 6, Duck season. Of course.
LeBron 6?
LeBron 6. Baker Mayfield woke up feeling dangerous. Presley Harvin's always dangerous. Always dangerous. That man, look at Jordan. I feel bad because at this point, Jordan Berry definitely knows he's not getting the job. Nobody's.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Do you think Jordan Berry has his job taken from Presley?
Oh gosh, yeah. First off, you're not spending a 7th-round pick. You went out and spent a 7th-round pick on a punter. That's as big of a red flag as it gets. If you're already the punter on the team, you're sitting home going, "What the heck, man? There's only one of me. There's only one punting job." I thought it was mine. Yeah, they didn't bring in another kicker. They just brought in another punter that they used a draft pick on. That's huge. Second, the dude's good. Like, if he was not good, that'd be one thing. If he was just as good as Jordan Berry, I'd say, it is what it is. The guy is really, really good, or at least he looks really good at OTAs and minicamp, and he's super exciting. I mean, if you're a guy like Danny Smith, who is the most electric man on a football field at all times, then you want a guy like Presley Harvin, and you're going to push for a guy like Presley Harvin. So I feel bad for Jordan Berry. I mean, I think he's put in his work. He's done his time here, but it's over. And I hope he finds a new job somewhere.
Yeah, I feel bad too. And this is coming from a guy who is really critical of Jordan Berry the last couple of years he's been here. But whenever the Steelers brought him back after Colquitt, just one of the worst signings ever. It might be above Dante Moncrief for keeping it a buck. Whenever Berry came back the second time, he punted extremely well. Like I really thought that the Steelers would at least keep him around another year. That's how well he punted. And so whenever the Steelers took Presley Harvin in the 7th round, aside from trying to find scouting reports for a punter when you're trying to get a timely, a time-sensitive article out on a Steelers draft pick, it kind of got the gears turning. And I'm like, wow, like Berry's probably gone, man. Like you don't spend a legitimate draft pick on a punter unless you really, really like him. So.
Nope, you don't. And everybody was freaking out about his 1 touchdown pass, but that's just the surface. And chances are we'll never see a punter sneak in our life. But the fact that it's there and it's being talked about and everybody loves how big this guy is, I mean, there's just way too much to him for you to go, we're going to keep the guy who has been an average punter at his best for another season when we have a rookie who's costing us literally nothing who we used a draft pick on. So it just nothing's in Jordan Berry's favor. If I was the Steelers at this point, if I'm Jordan Berry, at this point, I'm going to the Steelers and saying, hey, look, maybe somebody else needs a punter throughout the season. Can you please just get rid of me so I could go sign to somebody's training camp team and try out to beat one of their punters? It stinks for Jordan Berry, but it's exciting for the Steelers, and it's certainly exciting for Presley Harvin.
Exciting indeed, and that kind of appears to be the sort of player player and personality, that he wants to bring to a locker room as a punter. So, I'm sure for media people that would be extremely exciting. For fans, even more exciting. I mean, we're talking about a fan base that went crazy over a lineman checking in as a eligible receiver, to in the middle of the games, and then kind of the nice little shuffle dance Zach Bennett used to do towards the end of the games. As a wise man once told me, you get enough dogs in a locker room, eventually cats will start barking. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for another edition of All Steelers Talk, brought to you by All Steelers on Sports Illustrated. Go ahead and give us a follow at SI_Steelers. Follow me on Twitter at Donnie Druin, and follow Noah at Noah Strack, now verified. Congrats, big man. Shout out to you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, and we will see you next time.